So there's a bunch of different things that you typically will need whenever you're in and dealing with anything dealing with permissions, rights, and privileges. What are the differences between the three? So the rights, the permissions, and the privileges. So the rights typically are tasks that subjects or groups can do based off of their roles. Missions are just settings that subjects or groups can do based off of the task or rights that they have. And so this is the read, write, delete, and execute. So somebody said yesterday, change mod, chmod. So very similar to that. Like, what permissions do you have to be able to do with files or folders or groups, and then the privileges are the combinations of the rights and permissions. So usually people just say, well, what privileges should we get? And because of that, you can get a little bit more granular with rights and specific permissions, but they ultimately, for purposes of your test, these are the distinctions between these three topics. Usually what we see is some questions about some of these next slides, and I'll tell you when here in a second. So what we want to do is we want to identify the ways that we can authorize people. And so we have a whole bunch of things here that we're going to go through and just talk about. We've already gone through the need to know, least privilege, principle of least privilege, separation of duties. So there's this idea of this implicit deny. And so this implicit deny allows us to deny all. So we put it as, we say it's an anchor rule in an access control list. Why? Why should we implicitly deny all as a baseline? What do you think? Yes, it enforces the principle of least privilege. Great. Yep, default to fail close, start with the minimum privilege, yeah. Conservatively prevents unauthorized, yeah, absolutely. Easier to add acceptance, yeah, or not, right? If you don't want to, you don't have to. So yeah, we implicitly deny, and because of that, it could be more administrative, but it's more secure as well. Completely lock it down. In addition to that, we already talked about access control matrix, or ACMs, and how the subjects and their permissions to the objects within the how they interact can be related based off of the security policies and the access control list. And so remember, within access control matrix, each column is the access control list here. And so it's basically the list of allowed actions for the users within the organization. This thing that's called the capabilities table, it comes in as well, where it shows the permissions for each person. So user A, B, and C, and then what objects those have. Very similar to this previous one. Very similar to this previous one. The idea here with this is that it's read by row capabilities table, as opposed to access control list is read by column. That's the way that ISC2 wants you to remember it. There's also this thing that's called a constrained data interface that you may have heard of before. this is where things like database views come into play, and we hide menu options from users, or we add menu options to the interface. And by doing that, we give ourselves more control and flexibility to take or grant access accordingly to specific subjects, to specific objects. So the one thing that I want to make sure that we're clear on is this thing that's called mandatory access control, discretionary access control, and then some of the non-discretionary access controls like role-based and rule-based. So let's take a look at those very quickly here. See what we can come up with. So discretionary access control allows you, the data owner, to dictate or tell which users or subjects can have access to the files and resources that either you own or they own. And so discretionary access control gives much more flexibility. Whoever owns the data has discretion of who has access to it. Give me an example of that. Discretionary access control. Yeah, I'm thinking more. If you have, people giving people access to Google Docs. I was thinking something similar along that, like my Google Photos. I bought a not a nice camera, but like a decent camera about a year and a half ago, and I have it in sport mode where I just hold down the button and it takes like 10 pictures, and I know one of them is going to be good. And so what I do is I typically, when we're at sporting events, I just take a bunch of pictures, and I share it out to not only our family but other people who are playing in the on the team. And so discretionary access control it's at my discretion.